Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you've had a lovely coffee chat. We're back for our second panel, which is on innovating industry and research. And we have two really awesome panelists today. Our first is Miriam, who is from Roland Berger. She's a partner there within their digital platform. She's an expert on building sustainable business models and products through digital transformation. So she is an absolute genius when it comes to digital transformation. She's had incredible leadership positions in some very big, well-known companies, eBay, PayPal, and she brings a really broad range of expertise and experience from across industry. So we're really delighted to have you. Thank you very much.
Very, very happy to be here.
Thank you. And we also have our second panelist, who is beaming in from the UK, who is Strategic Advisor for e-infrastructure to the UK Science Technology Facilities Council. But she was formerly Director of the Hartree Centre, which had the mission of increasing the adoption of technologies by industry. And she's also co-founder of the Women in High Performance Computing organisation. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Alison Kennedy to our panel this morning. Thank you very much, Alison.
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be joining you remotely and looking forward to the discussions.
Excellent. And by the sounds of it, everybody can hear everybody. So we're winning. Excellent. Thank you. Brilliant. So our topic this morning is innovating industry and research. And I think certainly what we've seen in the last couple of years is that there has been disruption to the status quo. And that has caused an awful lot of challenges, but we also seem to have, as we're coming through, we're at a bit of a crossroads. We're at a very interesting historic time where there are unbelievable opportunities, and digital technologies, computing, the tools that are emerging and are growing at the moment are going to play such a critical part of the pathways into the future. So it's a really exciting time to be thinking about how research and industry can be working together and feeding each other, but also learning from each other. So I just wanted to start off, if I could ask, Miriam, would you mind starting us off with some of your thoughts and insights from your experience on this topic?
I would love to. It's fantastic to be here. So many beautiful faces. It's fantastic. So many young faces. That's also fantastic. I love your question, and we did have a very, very quick conversation before today. And what I had told you back then, and I still strongly believe, and I'm an advocate of the importance of actually making the right decisions now, like you just alluded to. Because as we know, everything is growing so quickly and growing exponentially that if now we make any kind of mistakes in the way we look at data and the way we advise companies and the way companies choose to create a customer experience, the scissor will go up, right? The trajectory will be so much wider if we now make a mistake because the growth is exponential. So it's actually now the right opportunity to look very, very closely, also looking at, all the biases, etc., looking at diversity very closely. Technology is enabling us, and we have to make sure that now we take the right steps in the right direction. Otherwise, it will be very costly to turn things back, if possible, in the first place.
And I guess we're beginning to see that already
Exactly.
in lots of ways, which we'll explore. Alison, would you like to come in at that point with your perspective?
Yes, I think I agree absolutely with Miriam that we're at a very exciting point. So the Hartree Centre that I work with was set up to support government objectives to use novel technologies to enhance industrial competitiveness and productivity. And I think we see post-COVID that there are even more opportunities for digital to feed into the economic and research agenda, both in the UK, in Europe, in every country. We see that digital is really central, that the companies and that the organizations that will progress are the ones who know how to use their data, how to organize it and take it forward, who can understand it. So in my particular organization, we're using supercomputers, which are essentially just a tool which will either generate large amounts of data through complex simulations, or will analyze large amounts of data collected elsewhere. So the opportunities to use that to solve industrial and societal problems are huge. And I agree with Miriam, we really need diverse teams who will look at the different sorts of problems and decide which ones we are able to tackle best.
Thank you. So diversity is something that we're thinking about a lot. And I'm aware that you're both of you in your different fields thinking about that. So I mean, Miriam, how is it that diversity is a topic that you engage with? And I mean, when we spoke before, you were saying there are some bits that really are just no-brainers, and there are other bits that are a bit more tricky.
Yes, no, absolutely. So my first career step after I graduated university, I started in consulting at Roland Berger, actually, over 20 years ago. And back then there were hardly any females actually in that business. It was me, and especially on the client side, it was mainly men. We've come a long way since then, but still now I return after 20 years and I return as a partner, obviously a way more senior position than a junior consultant. But again, the number of females is still, there's a lot of potential there. There's still a lot of room for improvement. And I mean, my company and all the companies that I have worked for in the past, I mean, they're all great, and they all advocate very, very much diversity, and not only gender diversity, but diversity in general is extremely important. Sometimes, though, you still have to make sure that the mindset is in the right spot, because everybody says yes, it's important, and yes, we've got to listen to everybody, and diverse companies are more successful than non-diverse companies. So there's actually the numbers behind the case that really prove it. But often you do speak to colleagues or to clients, and then when they don't fully understand what you're trying to say, they might brush it off and go on to the next point. And then it's really about being bold and courageous and saying, no, wait a second. You didn't understand, or you didn't really listen to what I was saying. It is so important, and please hear me out. So it's sometimes really about being louder and not just saying, they didn't listen to me, or they're not really diverse after all, but actually taking that additional step and being very bold and courageous. So that also probably sounds very obvious, but I do see very often that even myself, I sometimes think, oh no, I'll just be quiet on this one, I'll sit it out. But no, we mustn't. So.
I'm going to come back to some of those things in a minute, but Alison, because I think you have a slightly different angle on the same thing.
Yeah, I think as you can all tell from looking at me, I'm significantly older. I'm certainly older than anybody else in the room, and much older than the audience. So I was lucky enough to go into computing at a time when there was a real shortage, a much bigger shortage than there is nowadays. And employers were very open to taking on people with diverse backgrounds. So there were a lot more women around, and I grew up in a diverse environment. I think also early on in my career, I can give you a couple of examples of when I was working in companies where it was obvious you needed diversity. So one, I was working in a company where we were developing the first touch screens to be used in banks. We were about to ship it out on a Saturday night. I was working in the operating system, not on the actual touch screen. And the guys who'd been developing it said, do you want to try it out? We finished testing it. And it was obvious when I touched the screen, it had never been tested with any women, because women's fingernails tend to be slightly longer and the sensitivity was wrong. So I got to try it out. Then a couple of the guys had to phone their girlfriends to come in, and they determined it wasn't right for women. And then in another example, we were doing something that was going to be shipped out to the Middle East. And they'd been sent all the Arabic text, and it was only when somebody from another department came in and said, you realize that you have to put the text so it reads from right to left and not left to right. So that's two examples of where, if you don't have a diverse team, you can make mistakes, which it takes you a while to rectify. So to me, it's always been important to try and have a diverse team around about me. I think women have different skills, different interests. I can give you another recent example. One of the challenges that we're looking at is how can we design more aerodynamic cars? And if you speak to most of the males in the team, they think, well, if it's more aerodynamic, it'll go faster. Whereas most women are thinking if it's more aerodynamic, it'll minimize fuel usage and be much more environmentally friendly. So if you don't have that diversity around, you look at problems from a different point of view. And that's one of the things, I've taken from my career, and why we try very much to focus on what are the core skills needed for a job, and not, for example, you need somebody with a physics degree, but if it's that you need somebody with good math skills, you can pick that up from people who have a range of backgrounds. So just being very clear on what you need for the job and how that helps you to increase the diversity and bring in different people.
Thanks, Alison. And I love those examples. I think that really helps us get a sense of it. So what I'm curious about is I think it's, as you said when we spoke earlier, it's a no-brainer that having diverse teams gets better results. But so where are you seeing the most traction? Where are you seeing it being? Where is it happening, and why is it happening there and maybe not in other places?
Well, one area of a business or a value proposition that a company may offer is certainly everything that is consumer facing or touches the consumer. In some of my previous roles, I've been responsible for the end-to-end customer experience, from the very, very early touch points to the after sales and everything that happens in between. And there, it's important, I think, that everybody working on these topics, they have to be as diverse as your target group. So anything around customer experience, anything, can be B2B or B2C, or I've worked in B2B2C many, many years of my career. And it's around the getting the customer experience right. And that's what I had in the back of my mind when I was talking earlier about the gap widening if we don't get it right, is because now companies are implementing new systems, they're implementing new rules, they're trying to leverage digitization to cater to their consumers or their customers better. And now they're starting to get things wrong, and I'm starting to get very, very nervous, actually. And I mean, Alison brought some great examples. There's some others which I'm sure you guys all have heard of. The Amazon hiring algorithm, right? That was basically very, very successful in recommending men and recommending men more. And then all of a sudden there was this huge bias. And I was just speaking to a colleague who's a data analyst at Roland Berger in the digital platform. And he was saying it's going to take many, many years for that algorithm to come back to normal and to be diverse. I mean, he said he wanted to portray very black and white so that I'm kind of techie, but not that techie, so that I understand. And he said, it could well take 20 years. And I was like, oh my God, that's disastrous. That really is disastrous. What do we do? And so I'm currently, with my colleagues, looking at things where we can take the biases out of the current algorithms, because it will otherwise take too much time. So I'd love to have a chat with anyone here in the room that might have any experience on that later. Yeah. But customer experience, that's the point where I would say that's where we need to focus.
And where is it that there are good channels between research and business? Where is the science getting through? When does that happen well, I suppose is the question.
Well, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but of course there where the money is, right? So it's going to be around how can we attract more customers? How can we get a greater share of the wallet? How can we make more money, etc.? So if there you can basically prove along the inception of a new product or a new feature or a new offering that being diverse will make you so much more money in the end, then that usually works quite well. But it's companies usually are not going to focus on being diverse just because of, it's the right thing to do maybe. There's got to be some kind of value add in monetary sense.
So some storytelling.
And some storytelling,
that can
always a good thing. Yeah.
Help with that.
Yeah.
And Alison, does that resonate with you? Because you've had with the Hartree Centre, you've been a bit of a broker, haven't you, between what's going on in the science community and what industry could do.
Yeah. I think for us that one of the things which has helped recently has been the increased focus on net zero. So I think companies are willing to invest in things that they think will be more environmentally friendly. They can also see that that's likely to generate sales. So, for example, one of the areas which is growing very fast for us is green chemistry. And that's something where, it's easy to attract in women. It's easy or relatively easy to sell projects into industry, to interest them in things like this. And it is an area, again, where rightly or wrongly, companies perceive that women will bring added value to it. If they're trying to improve shampoos, washing liquids, consumer products like that, they can see that having a diverse team of people from different backgrounds will help. So I would agree. I think most companies don't say, well, set targets for diversity, or think, well, we'll employ women even if the best person for a job is a man. But I think we're gradually coming around to the idea, that diversity is here to stay. 50% of the population is women. They see challenges differently. I think we're in a much more collaborative environment, and generally women are better at the soft skills. So they're much more able to integrate into teams, to engage with their colleagues, to admit when they know something and when they don't know something, and be good team players. And I think that's really valued by industry and academia.
So I think what's coming out here is this idea of value, and how different people have different understandings of what is valuable, and what is valuable will be different in different contexts. So this is a very selfish question, really, because I work in forensic science, which is an area that has untold value for the justice system, and yet it's really struggled to demonstrate that value, because often doing forensic science brilliantly doesn't always make anybody money, and it certainly doesn't save people money. And so trying to demonstrate that value in ways that are not financial can be a real challenge in terms of demonstrating that it's worth investing in, and trying to tell that story. So I'm curious about how where have you seen people successfully? So net zero is a great example, I think, of being able to. We're in a time when the sustainability goals and our impact on the planet has value that can stand up against finance. Are there other areas, do you think, that we're coming to a point where they will have the same type of sway? Or I'm just thinking in terms of early career scientists and how they can get their science to places where it can make a difference. If it makes people money, that's great, but if it maybe doesn't make people money but makes society better, what might be the strategies there?
Wow, I think I have to think about that for a second. Alison, or do you want to go ahead?
I think one of the other ones where we're beginning to do quite a lot of work is land use, food security. So that's one where you can see that there are profits for certain companies, but it's something which we as a society have to get right. Sort of the weather's changing, climate impact. There's concerns about how we're going to feed ourselves. If food supplies are restricted from wars or droughts or whatever. So that's an interesting area where you can bring together people with all sorts of scientific expertise. Other areas that we're working in, say, are how do we reduce the amount of energy used to treat wastewater? So that one brings in that has an environmental side of things, but it brings in scientists from all sorts of different areas as well. So it's really just thinking about, what are the challenges, what are the kinds of areas where you as a young person would worry about your children living in a world that's going to be worse in 30 years' time, and what can we do now? How can we use our science skills to try and solve that? And there almost certainly is an economic argument for it as well. But if you can think about it as this is something which is of societal benefit, you can then work on the economic side. I'm sure with forensics, there is an economic argument because, if you can reduce the length of trials, or get the right people convicted, it's going to save on the cost of lawyers, isn't it?
Becoming more efficient is always going to have an economic impact. I'm
going to bring Alison to my next meeting. That sounds marvelous.
Yeah. Yes, I think everything around forecasting, whatever it really is, anything around forecasting, I think is going to be very, very valuable because that will help us become more efficient. And then, I think we all agree, efficiencies are always a good thing. So, and of course, a topic that is very close to, or should be very close to all of our hearts, is the net zero topic or anything sustainable. So, and bringing the female side of things into that, I think has not yet been explored enough. Like the example with the aerodynamic car, etc. And there's so many more. I would also say climate, nature, food security, energy security, and then efficiencies. Those are definitely topics. And then maybe thinking out of the box and thinking about what's the worst that could happen? Nobody will ever think it will, but this year has been, or the last 2 years have been crazy, and then this year with the war, there's been another something that nobody would have ever thought was able to happen. That happened. So add in a little bit of creativity, and then the topic around forecasting is what I would love to see more.
And I guess resilience.
Oh yes,
in
then
that,
you have to be resilient as well,
so that you can be agile with those unexpected events.
So resilience and agile, those are yes, two very important parts. So basically keeping the end in mind, but then being agile and iterative along the way, because sometimes you have to adapt your story, like we were saying earlier. You have to have a good story because that will convince people and get people sold on your ideas.
So I think one of the things we've been thinking about this morning is that actually collaboration is such a core part of diversity, and particularly bringing gendered research into play so that we have not only excellent research but also diverse voices contributing to it. So I guess where we see really good connections between research, science and industry, that's exciting. But in your experience, does politics have a part to play, and if so, how much? I'm thinking often there are incentives for industries to invest or to go in certain areas. To what degree does that need to be part of the conversation?
Oh yeah, politics plays a huge role, sometimes in the forefront, sometimes behind the scenes. And sometimes it's a pull, sometimes it's a push. So what I mean by that is, sometimes the politics decides something and pushes it onto the companies or onto the academia, and sometimes it would be the other way around, which is then often one would assume that companies and academia have been feeding politics the years beforehand to get this decision to be made. So it's a hand-in-hand type process, but I think it's extremely important, and also keeping in mind, what is the story that politics might want to say, because of course they always need to worry about being reelected, etc. So also, figuring out how do I position what I want to achieve in the industry, within politics, because there's always there can be a win-win, or there always should be a win-win maybe 2, 3, 4 wins on all sides, because then concepts and ideas will actually be very successful. Putting yourselves in every stakeholder's shoes, and politics definitely is one of those.
For good or for ill, yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Alison, is that because you're now working within a research council within the case?
Yeah, I think probably doesn't affect us quite as much. I think the areas that we work in are largely determined by the government's industrial strategy. So that says, the industries that we particularly want to promote are, but these are very wide. So for individual projects and companies we work with, the researchers, the scientists have a big choice. For example, we choose not to do defense work, although defense is a big part of government spending. So, and there are other areas where if people think, I'm a vegetarian, I don't want to work in a certain area, we can accommodate that. But politics is always at the background. I'm sure, like other people, we have politicians visiting all the time and wanting to check that we're spending their money in an appropriate way. So, but it's not close intervention.
It's interesting when you think about that sort of the social contract that we have between science and governments, and how that's sort of evolved, and how it actually probably did start around warfare and ensuring that scientific breakthroughs were coming through that could be useful in that context, and the journey that it's been on. So I think it's interesting to get your insights there, that it's very much a symbiotic entity, and you can't ignore the politics, and you can't ignore industry drivers, and you can't ignore scientific drivers, but holding all of those together is a journey. For sure.
Like very complex ecosystem.
Right.
For sure,
yeah.
yes.
So I'm really curious, Miriam, how you've had this very interesting journey in your career so far. What is it that has been your guiding light, or what is it, because you've had some incredible roles. So looking from the outside in, you've clearly gone after certain things, and you've had some fairly strong vision. So how have you done that? And
oh, this is going to sound really, really boring, because I'm sure everybody will probably have the similar answer. But to me, it's always about creating value. I really want something to be significantly different tomorrow, or in a month, or in a year than it was before. I want to. This is very emotional, but I want to be proud of the things I've done. So, and you can only be proud if you've actually achieved something that was ambitious and maybe not anybody else could have done easily. So, you feel like you've significantly added value. It's really about gathering people in the company, gathering your teams together to root for the same type of cause, to motivate your colleagues and your teams to be able to also want to reach that North Star which you designed or created or defined together. So, yeah, it's about adding value, really.
But what have you done when there are people who haven't seen it your way or been on board?
Similar to what I said a few minutes ago, it's really putting yourself in their shoes, right? So what I did, I have a coach that I work with. And what we do is we take a piece of paper and we put, stakeholders' names on these pieces of paper, put them on the floor, and then, I will go around, stand on each piece of paper, close my eyes and imagine, right, what does this person need? What does this person want? And it always comes down to personal needs of every individual, right? Even a politician, even a CEO of a company, or a customer care agent in a company, everybody has their things they're afraid of, things they want to achieve. So putting yourself in everybody's position and finding the angle and the perspective that will show to them that it will be meaningful to them, then it's a bit time consuming doing this exercise, but it's surely an investment to put yourself in their shoes or into their heads. And then, drink a coffee, drink another coffee, get to know them, see what is that rocks their boat, and then that usually works quite well. And that's what Alison was also saying. That's what we women can do so much better than men, right? Now I don't want to be stereotypical in the other direction now either. But
I think we're getting a consensus that having coffee is a positive thing in lots and lots of ways that might not be immediately measurable, but probably long term are going to come on through. Yeah. Alison, what would your perspective on that be?
Well, I started working in computing 43 years ago. So I've obviously seen a lot of changes, and nothing in that time has been linear. So I think in many ways, my trajectory will be similar to the women of today. You have to keep reinventing yourself because the technology is changing, society's changing. So I've really just been fairly opportunistic. I think I'm one of these people that goes, why are we doing this? What's the point of it? Could we do it better? And I've always been willing to speak to other people, to ask for their opinions, to get help from them. And I think that's the sort of thing that enables you to move and to do different things. I think it was also interesting when I moved to STFC, they did this exercise on looking at people's personality types to try and help you to work with your colleagues. And I was all the other, I think there was something like 14 directors. And of the 14 directors, 13 of them were one type who are banging the table, ordering people to do things. And I was the exception. I came out as a collaborative communicator. And the two of the others are women, but they're very similar to the men. So I think that was a realization to the organization that there wasn't just one type of person who could be a director, that if you were working in different areas, that different strengths would be good. And I see a difference in the profile of the directors who've been recruited since. They're all more collaborative. So I think that the skills that perhaps you needed to succeed 20 or 30 years ago are not the same as the ones that people will need to succeed in the future, which I think is a positive thing. But I think it's about staying enthusiastic, agree with Miriam, speaking to people, communicating. And frankly, when I'm going into a technical meeting, I take somebody who's in their late 20s, early 30s, because they'll have the answers in a way that perhaps somebody who's a bit more set in their ways and not as actively involved day to day will know. So it's about understanding what your role in the team is and where you need to call on other people.
Thank you. And I think that really resonates with our first panel as well, which is there are certain models of leadership out there, aren't there? And for some of us, that will be consistent with who we are, and for some of us, that won't be. And being brave to know yourself well enough to know what your gifts are and how you work best and in ways that give you the most energy, and then sticking to your guns and figuring out a way to be that person, even if the infrastructure that you're operating within doesn't yet recognise or value that. And I often talk about the importance of showing, not necessarily telling. If you can show people that something works, that's far more powerful than just telling them that it's going to work. And I guess that maybe holds true in this situation as well, that know yourself, know what you're good at, know how you like to work as well, and then create opportunities to make that possible.
Sometimes it's also not about fighting something, but just going with it. So I was given a really good piece of advice the other day from a very senior executive in Siemens. She was female, and I was speaking to her, and I said to her, I was at this customer event the other day, and I was standing at one of those bistro tables with men, and the conversation started out, and we all of us were discussing, and within 5 minutes they were talking about soccer or football. And I said to her, I thought that was so rude, and then I left the table because I can't talk to that, I don't know. And then she said, that was the biggest mistake. Just stay there, ask a few questions. Maybe before, if you're going to go to an event with people that might be interested in soccer or football, look at the rankings, look at what club's on top, what club's on bottom, just know a few little details, and then you can basically shine and be a part in the conversation, and they will remember you forever. And I thought, wow, that, so not try to fight it and get upset about it, but just, go with the flow. They're not trying to harm you, just be a part of it, and then you will see that new opportunities open up. So to Alison's point, reinvent yourself and be curious. Continue to be curious, which I'm sure most of you are anyway in the fields you're working in. But that's a good thing, very good thing.
Pick your team wisely, though. That's be aware of the latest wins and losses.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Both of you are working in such interesting spaces. You must be you're seeing the future as it's coming. What is it that's exciting you? If you think, where are we going to be in 5 years' time? What is it that's exciting you at the moment?
So excited and scared at the same time, right? The masses of data. So the opportunities that are there are so exciting. But then again, a little bit scared, because if we get it wrong, like I had said, then it can, then it will be very costly to turn things back. But at the pace that society is reinventing itself, thanks to technology, it's so quickly that, I'm glad you think that Alison and I know where the future is going to go. Maybe you do, Alison. I'll be really curious to hear. I don't. But one thing's for sure is that everything's going to be quicker and faster, and we're going to have to be reacting quicker as well. So this concept of agile in a work environment or a research environment possibly, that is going to have to be adapted to your life in general, because you never know what's going to happen. And again, not wanting to bring what's been going on the last 2 years into play, but there we've all had to reinvent ourselves and refocus. And I think that will be key to survival. Sounds a bit harsh maybe, but to happiness maybe is a better word. That will be key to happiness going forward.
So being able to incorporate uncertainty.
Yes.
And respond to it in ways that are positive.
Yes.
Yeah. And any particular digital transformations that you're seeing in that space at the moment?
Well, so there's of course a lot of people focusing on the newest, latest stuff that's coming, right? The majority of companies and the industry, however, are still very, very busy with actually getting the first steps of digitization right. So a lot of companies, you'd be surprised, but a lot of companies think, no, we're digital just because they don't use a fax machine anymore, or because they now, since COVID, have been able to do remote meetings. So they already think they're on top of the game and are super proud of themselves. But they have only scratched the surface. And that's partly my job now, is to getting these companies to understand how much more potential there is. And then again, with the data, it's usually all around data, that there's so much more that needs to happen to be truly digital. They're missing out on so many opportunities still. So while I'm very happy for a lot of people to be focusing on what's the day after tomorrow, or what's after the metaverse, for example, the majority is still bogged down with pretty basic things. Fortunately for consultants, but it's.
But that's often the way, isn't it? Small things make a big difference.
Yes.
But knowing what those things are.
It's not only technology, right? It's about the right mindset. So a lot of companies often don't yet know what to do with the technology and the data they have, because their mindsets have not yet reached that moment in time of actually embracing the information that's laying at the tip of their feet.
And I guess understanding how, in particular contexts, you can bring that technology in with the excellence and expertise of your people.
Yes.
To augment what's happening rather than
Absolutely.
to dissuade or detract from, which is.
Yes. But now Alison will tell us about this.
I've set you up there.
I think for us, the biggest opportunity and threat comes from artificial intelligence. So I think with the huge amounts of data and the very complex simulations that are being done, increasingly artificial intelligence is being used perhaps to limit the solution space if you're searching for an answer. So the sorts of problems we're using it on at the moment in a scientific context usually don't have particular ethical issues or issues around responsibility. But as we become more dependent on AI and we tackle the sorts of problems that we can't validate through experiment, it's going to become, we really have to take it on trust. We have to be sure that the answer, sure as we can, that the answers that we're coming out with, we're not making horrible mistakes that are going to have repercussions going forward. So that's it. I would guess that everybody working in technology sitting in your room will have to know something about AI in the next 10 years because it is going to affect what they're doing. The next big thing coming down the track is quantum computing. So that will be used to solve the sorts of problems that can't be solved by classical computers at the moment. So for example, something that seems quite straightforward, like planning a route. If you're an Amazon driver or whatever, planning your route so that you make all the stops in the right sort of order, that's actually a very, very difficult computational problem to solve. So quantum computing is starting out with fairly simple things like logistics, where it doesn't really matter if it takes you slightly longer, but will be used for much more important problems. So it's bringing in the responsibility elements into the technology work that we do, and being clear with the public and the people we work with, what we know and what we're inferring from the sorts of results we get. So I think that's what's going to be exciting and worrying going forward.
So really thinking about those, maximising the goods, reducing the harms in a holistic way that speaks value to a diverse group of stakeholders. Great. Okay, if anyone can come up with the answer to that, we will be on the money. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your some of your journey. I'm just aware we've got some really, really interesting people in the room. So please, I'd love to open up the floor and hear from you. Be bold.
Hi, I'm Ezgi. I'm a neuroscientist. I have two questions. One is about this diversity issue. So you said, Miriam, that in the companies there has to be some sort of value so that they can include this diversity aspect. But there's something I have been thinking about with respect to the inclusion aspect that we talked about earlier. I mean, I think one kind of has to be a bit careful there in the sense that you can check the diversity box, like having a woman, having a black person, having an Asian person. But then if these people don't feel included in the company, my opinion is that this is not really kind of a long-term perspective for the company culture. They have to address this at some point, in my opinion. Maybe what's your take on that? That's my first question. And the other one is about the forecasting. Yeah, this is a bit of a tricky issue. So what's the time frame you're talking about? Because let's say 3 years ago, or 4, probably many people wouldn't have guessed that there would be a pandemic into 2020, for example. So what's kind of the time frame that's kind of a realistic forecasting time frame?
Okay, I'll answer the second one first, because that'll be a shorter answer, I think. Depends on the use case, maybe. I wouldn't be able to say, to be honest, what the time frame needs to be. it's if you're looking at stock markets, that will be a different time frame depending on what stock you're invested in, and that's one use case. Looking at the probability of another war happening somewhere, that can be more like a 20-year time frame. So I don't know. But I'll answer the second question, and then maybe I'll hand back over to you, Alison. Okay. Actually, I shouldn't.
Okay.
There, should I? But just very quickly to your first questions, I fully agree. And there is that one saying, and I'm probably going to get it horribly wrong. Maybe one of you knows how it goes right. But this inviting to the party is not enough if you're not asked to dance, or something similar like that. Exactly. So ticking all the boxes, and yes, we've got 50% women in our employee scores. That's not going to help. I mean, that's part of the equation, but that's not going to actually solve the whole problem. So what I was speaking to earlier, yes, I'm sitting at the table already now, but sometimes I may not feel heard. And then that's the moment where you have to then put your foot down and make yourself heard, and not just don't be quiet. You have to. We're usually invited to the party, but you have to then go and dance still, because you might not be asked to dance yet. So it's about also being a good example. So being a role model, supporting other females, but not only females, but also the persons of color, or the mom or the dad with small children that basically leave work at 3, and then they are not part of whatever's happening between 3 and 6 in the evening. So, being really, you yourself being really inclusive as well, and using the female power that we've got to see these things and to read between the lines and be a role model as well.
And I guess also create opportunities for others to join us in that.
Yes.
So when we spoke, you were talking about how can we make it possible for men to join this vision of enabling women.
Exactly.
And it's going to be a joint endeavour in that.
Exactly. And I just recently wrote about the importance of net helping rather than just networking. A network is only going to be valuable if you actually help the people in the network. So.
Thank you. Alison, do you have thoughts?
Yes, I think on the first one, I agree absolutely about the difference between diversity and inclusion. And I'll give you an example of something which we had to turn into a learning opportunity. So a wider organization in STFC was looking at setting its EDI strategy. So they asked for volunteers to go along to this meeting, and they scheduled the meeting as a lunchtime meeting during Ramadan. So I had to point out to them that if you're looking to include a wide section of people in the organization about how you could be more inclusive, that was not a good time to schedule a meeting. So that was something that we got over to them that had to be learned. Similarly, the big supercomputing conferences we go to, one of the things that Women in HPC does is it organizes evening events, which we get sponsored by companies which don't revolve around drink. So it's a bit more of a networking opportunity. And these are open to men and women, but a lot of women don't feel particularly confident about going into a room full of drunk men and spending their evening there. So it's about thinking about who your audience is and what you can do. In terms of widening inclusion and the sorts of people we should include as allies, what I've been trying to do is particularly to bring in men that I know have daughters, because you have to think, would you want your daughter to grow up in this sort of environment or to work in this sort of environment? Or can you, if you're in a position of power, be an ally which ensures that your children, when they go into the workforce, will have better opportunities? So that's the first question. In terms of the forecasting, I would agree we can't necessarily prepare for the future. We don't know when things are going to happen, but we have to be ready to react and move. So COVID-19 was a good example that a lot of our research suddenly switched to, could we use our facilities? Could we use our expertise to support efforts to categorize COVID proteins? What could we do to help there? And similarly, there's a big movement on urgent computing, which is how can we suddenly, if there's some sort of a crisis, what can we do to suddenly switch our resources to working on that? So it is a challenge. We just have to be as ready as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi. Hello. Thank you very much for this very nice panel. I'm Andrea. I am an astrophysicist, actually from Colombia. And so I will just share a story. When I was hired for my PhD position, and when I said that to my colleagues, one of them just told me, you were probably hired, he also applied to that same position. He said, you were probably hired because you are a Latina and you're a woman, so you are filling the quota for diversity. And so I feel like sometimes these positive actions that academia or industry try to take, sometimes that plays against me because they are seeing as she was hired because she ticks the box to show that we are so diverse and we are doing something great for equality and inclusion, but they don't see that I am in that position because I do actually have the right skills. So I just want to ask you, how do you go about that? And I've seen that at many areas, in academia, in industry, at a political level. Like, for example, in politics, like this minister, she was probably there because, they needed a female in the board, and because she's a woman, so probably like a guy should have taken that position that is more experienced. And I've tried to, share my views, like, no, I mean, like, more diverse group, it's positive because of this and that, how more females, etc. But people do not understand that. They are, like, immediately they are saying, she's there because she is a woman, someone else could have done better. And so I always answer that as in, what guarantees you that the man that is there is not there just because he's a man, right? So that's one of the things that maybe what can you comment? And then the second thing, building up on what Ezgi just said, is, again, ticking the boxes. But what can you actually do to ensure diversity in industry and academia? And what that I mean, are we helping these people to support their visa, their relocation expenses, all these kind of things that, I mean, if you actually want to bring people from, like, for example, South America, have you thought that I might don't have the money to actually relocate to a new place, or to build, like, for example, my skills about language in the new place that I am? They don't think about that. What are your takes on that? Thank you.
I'm not quite sure who's to start. I don't always
Miriam,
want to.
it'd be lovely to hear from you first.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Good. Thank you for making a decision. Actually, tech talent, for example, right, is so hard to get these days that companies are really going out of their way to supply for visa, travel, shipping. Getting talent to come over to have a look at the working environment, to let them, for example, in Berlin, let them experience Berlin, bringing their family over, letting them see if that's a city that they might want to live in. So there's actually a lot that is being done there in the tech space, because companies often have realized these days, we don't have enough talent. We're going to really hit a wall if we don't now hire people, and we're going to have to be diverse. Or, for example, the policy, even during COVID, was, okay, once COVID's over, we will get everybody to come back to the office because we're afraid that our team spirit is going to suffer. Now they've realized, no, people don't want to come back to the office, and the talent that you need to attract, they might want to work from Spain or from South America or from wherever. And companies are now opening up a lot towards this and supporting with visas, etc. But again, I don't want to do them an injustice, but most of the time I would say it's because they're hurting and they have to change and they have to adapt, right? But to be honest, let's be, like Alison said, let's just be very opportunistic. If that's the current situation, let's not worry about why. Let's just see, oh wow, okay, this is the new thing, and let's embrace that. And same to the quotas of the females. I get told that all the time, or even if I don't get told, I can see it in people's eyes. Oh yeah, okay, you got that position because you're female. I used to care. I so don't care anymore. I honestly don't care anymore. It's about showing, right? Showing that you can do it, and then it will be a non-topic all of a sudden, and just taking the opportunity to be sitting at the table, to be able to navigate and to be able to have an impact. Don't care about if you're there because of the quota. It doesn't matter. Just do your job, do your passion, follow your curiosity, just go and do it. And it's so much more important, I think, for years and years I was thinking the quota is a really bad thing, right? It's going to get everybody to wonder if this is really the right person. And yes, there is going to be women in positions that are doing a worse job than a man would have done, because of course not every woman is brilliant, not every woman is doing a fantastic job, and some might be sitting there just because of the quota. But bottom line, if you look at all the aspects, I think we have to take that into account for the greater good, and just go and do it, and don't worry about what somebody might think. Show them that you can. Yeah.
I think the thing I've learned in the last few years is that there will be some people that you just can't win over. They will never come round. So being quite decisive about who you're going to listen to, about who you are, is a really important one, because if imposter syndrome is alive and kicking in all of us, right? And but if you have certain people who you respect, who you trust, and if they're saying you're really good at this, you have shined in that area, you're doing a great job, that carries you through. Well, for me anyway, that's carried me through when there have been those people who I know are thinking less kind things.
I mean, when you were introducing me earlier, you said Miriam's a genius in something, and I cringed. I was like, oh no, I'm so
that's what I've seen.
That's what I've seen. Imposter syndrome part. So I was thinking, and physical pain basically in my stomach, right? But yes, I've done shitload of stuff, and I've done a really good job. Yes, right? Maybe not a genius, but I'm awesome, right?
Definitely a genius. Definitely a genius. Oh, Alison, have you got thoughts?
Yeah, I think in my experience, nobody brings you onto a PhD program or a postdoc or brings you into a company purely to fulfill a quota. So if people think you got the job because of your gender, then they're probably just jealous. I will say that there are occasions on which we'll take a woman who perhaps doesn't have as much experience, but who's got huge potential, because we can see that investing, with a bit of support and a bit of additional help, that person will grow into a real star in the organization in a way that a man who perhaps has a little bit more experience, or a woman with a little bit more experience who's complacent, will not have the same impact. So I think you have to be confident about it. There are occasions, I'm sure, where people like me get invited onto panels or committees or whatever because I'm a woman. But for me, you have to say, well, I think it's, if you want to do it and you think it's important, then I believe that you can't be what you can't see. So if there's no women there at all, that's not good. So perhaps some tokenism is necessary for women to be role models and to set the scene for the future. But please don't underestimate yourself. In my organization, again, we recently went through an exercise of looking at succession planning. So, if the group leaders leave or they get promoted, who are we going to move into the roles? And although women are about 25 to 30% of the employees, in over half of these positions, it's a woman that we've identified as the one with the best skills to take over. So I think women tend to be quick learners. They have different skills. Do not underestimate yourself, and don't let men undermine your confidence.
and listen to your intuition. Seriously, listen to it. You're usually right. Men and women, we're always usually right when it comes to intuition. And keeping in mind, that the whole idea of diversity is still a fairly young concept in the grand scheme of things. So of course, we're not happy with where we are, and we'd love to be further with everything that's happening. But it's thousands and thousands of years of men's clubs, and it's also a reason why we've got this imposter syndrome, why we sometimes don't feel like we're really playing with in the real game, etc. It will still take some time, but now again for diversity, not only for technology or data, this is also a very critical moment where we're on the right trajectory, and just everybody keep going and spreading the word, and especially if ever you have the opportunity to go to a man and say, I've been speaking with some female friends or in my female network, and we've been talking about ABC. What's your opinion? I'd love to hear a man. They love that because they do sometimes feel a bit left out. Looking at the men in the room. A lot of takeaways for you to take back home.
I think I'm coming with the next question. I want to go back to the idea of value, because the scientists usually, we are taught to think that bringing economic value is somewhat shameful. We should think, more about the great value for humanity. But actually, if we think about the economic value, some research doesn't make sense at all. So, for example, I come from the medical field. If the developments are so expensive that they do not make sense economically, it doesn't they would not work. So I wanted to know your opinion on that. Should we maybe teach scientists to think about the economic value of their research? And the second question I had is about the digitalization. So what does it mean, truly digital, in your understanding? And maybe if you have any ideas about the medical space, medical space is very regulated, and bringing anything to the digital takes years, and it's much longer than any other one. So any opinion on that?
I'm so happy that there's scientists working on things that do not necessarily have an economical value, right? Because there's for example, some horrible sicknesses where companies might not make a lot of money if they actually have a solution for it, because it's just too small group of, the N is too small. But it's so great to have people working on these things anyway. Do scientists have to understand the concept of economics? Definitely, just so that they, understand the other side of the table. But do they need to learn how to always put an economic value to what they're doing? If that would lead to them stopping what they're doing, then no, because it's super important to also have non-economic results, or economical results as well, I think. But understanding, again, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, depending on who it is you want to convince, would help for sure. Just like in medicine, doctors are often brilliant doctors, but they have no people skills. And so when I was, someone in my family was sick, and the way the doctor explained to them that, they might die, I was just like, oh my God, how can somebody convey a message like that? So that's actually something that I would love for scientists / doctors in medicine to be a little bit more educated on. But at the same time, they, of course, rather focus on the actual science of the medicine. What was your second question again?
About the true digital, what does it mean for you?
True digital to me would mean bringing it all together, being smart about bringing all the knowledge that we know with the human aspect of things that might not yet, or that is not yet part of AI, bringing all of those facets together and looking at it from a holistic end-to-end perspective. Digital has the power to help us do that and to look at different angles to create value again.
Yeah, I think to add for the second question, to add what Miriam said, I think with digital, certainly when we talk about it, the second word's usually transformation. So there's this element of change. You're looking to use digital to bring about a change for the better, pulling together whatever technologies and data you can lay your hands on to have a positive change. I think for the first question, I think it's a really interesting question, and it's one that we have debated quite frequently. So I think often for some fundamental blue skies research, often there are spin-offs further down the line. But sort of leaving that aside, there's the skills development and all sorts of other areas there. But to look specifically at medicine, for example, one of the things we are doing, you'll know if you work in the area, that developing new drugs is hugely expensive. And that's why drugs often cost thousands of pounds per patient. So one of the things we're doing with the drugs companies is trying to look for compounds which might be cheaper, so we can develop alternative drugs which might be equally efficient or almost as efficient in similar situations. So that's something where you're taking some research that somebody's done that says this is the optimal solution, and you're looking to see if there's some sort of substitute that would make it a bit more economically viable. But you need the initial research done before you can build on that. I think the other area which is interesting in this space is personalized medicine, where we can see there's big advances going on in the States. So effectively, at the moment, you can model parts of the human body, but it's much more difficult to model larger parts of it and bring together different systems. So we can see that in the States, where they have a different healthcare approach, there will be a few very wealthy individuals who will be able to benefit from this. But in countries such as Europe, where we have government-funded healthcare, or in much poorer countries, there's not really any option for that. So are these the sorts of projects we should be working on, or should we be doing something else? So again, there's very interesting fundamental research on how you build systems of parts of the body. But if we're never going to be able to use that for individuals, or at least we won't be able to use it until costs come down, is that a priority? So I don't have any good answers. But these are all the sorts of things that we need you, the scientists, to think about and to help to guide future decisions.
Thank you.
Now it's my turn. Thank you so much for this really amazing panel, and I have tons of notes now. But I want to go back to Izzy's question about forecasting and which time frame. I just have an idea, and I want to ask your opinion on that. I don't know. I have in my mind our brains work linear, or we think linear, something like, okay, this and then that and then that and then. But meanwhile, what you're talking about, this exponential technologies, obviously, they develop exponentially. So is our mind even prepared for this pace? I don't think so. So for me, I started thinking, whatever I think will be in 10 years, I need to, it will be in 5 years then. Or whatever I would think, in 20 years, no, at least 10 years. So I need to force myself, whatever initially I would think will be the time frame, just at least minimum the half. And if you listen to, if you follow Elon Musk, what he's talking about getting us to the moon, before it was not the moon, the Mars, something far away, and now he's talking about 2 years. What the hell? So, and if you get to understand what exponential development is, I think we as humans need also to train our brains to think differently about time and time phrases, which is really scary. Again, going back to this. So how are we going to solve this? Like, our brains are not ready yet. So what should we do? So, okay, this is my thought. I would love to hear if there's a solution, or there a way of thinking where we can gain power back, let's say, for ourselves. Yeah, that's it.
I'm going to put Alison on the spot on this one.
Yeah, well, I think I'm too old, I think, to be able to answer that question, because frankly, you know, as you get older, time moves more quickly. And I think that is a really difficult one as well, because of course some of these things depend on where the investment goes. You know, if there's a billionaire who's prepared to spend billions of pounds to make something happen faster, then it will happen faster. You know, as we alluded to earlier, whether we like it or not, wars tend to accelerate the development of technology, because a lot of the defense spending that goes in accelerates things which have spin-offs. So that makes it even more difficult to predict. You know, I think as a society, what we really want to try and focus on are what are the priorities? What do we think the priorities for our society are? And how can we harness what's happening to try and bring about the things that we think are most important? You know, frankly, if people go to Mars, I wouldn't want to go to Mars, especially if it was a one-way trip. You know, I think that's the complete waste of money. But I'm not an astrophysicist or, you know, a space enthusiast. But does my opinion count? So there's a whole lot of things there. We do have to make choices. And see what the outcomes are going to be of these choices. So I'm sorry, I haven't really answered your question, but I don't have an answer.
I don't think our brains will change much, to be honest. That's going to take millions of thousands at least years for that to happen. I mean, I do already feel my thumbs starting to become accumulated to my texting, right? So that's part of the evolutional stride moving forward. But it's like we discussed earlier, it's about having the open mindset and knowing that challenging, maybe it's not going to be 20 years. Just being very open and curious and constantly challenging and keeping all options open. So agile again, and then that might happen automatically, ideally, with the right mindset.
May I have a comment? I want to defend the brain.
Okay, all right.
Brain scientist.
Yes, sorry. So you know when you're riding a car in the city, it seems that you are going relatively fast. Mm-hmm. But then you go to the bigger road where you can ride faster, and you still feel that you are riding with the same speed. Uh-huh. So our brains are really adaptable. And I wish I could see the progress changing so far in my field, in dementia research, as you describe it for the crypto world, you know. That's unfortunately not the case. I believe we all have the right brains.
Yes, to our brains. Fantastic. Oh, dementia, that's going to be a hot topic going forward. Yeah, unfortunately.
Everyone's got a stake in that.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Brilliant. I think we're out of time. So is there one more question?
Yes, I know we're running out of time, so I will make it short.
Please, yeah.
Yes, I'm Alejandra. I'm studying land use change impacts on nature and people, and I do have a short question, and just one. So, do you think that gender and diversity are actually driving business partnerships? So it's a bit of a different scale. So we talked a lot how important this is within the company. Is it important when they are actually looking for partners for business? We know a lot of countries are actually really oppressive of women and diversity, yet we do a lot of business with them. And with the companies that are based on them, maybe because of economic reasons or loose environmental policies. Do you see a shift in the right direction? Is this important? Yeah, that's the question.
Very short answer, absolutely 100%. No doubt about it, just like different companies have different types of people sitting in them that want to be addressed by a whole different set of people. It works both ways. So for sure, we're currently doing a lot of work in the Middle East, and there's a lot of females on those projects as well. So that might not have been so much the case in past years. It's definitely helping partnerships for sure. Getting the right person in the right position at the right time, whoever that may be. It's about companies now looking, or Roland Berger now looking at what project do we have with which client, what consultants do we put on that project to make it a success. Not only from a skill set, but also from a personality trait perspective, for sure. Yeah, things we're looking at.
Yeah, short answer, I agree absolutely as well. I think both in industry and in academia, it's researchers play the role in scoping collaborative projects. And so I think there's huge potential there to pick your partners, to show what your strengths are, and to carry it forward.
Okay, so I guess I have the pleasure of the last question. Thanks a lot for this great round. And I'm Jessica Roman, an epidemiologist working here in Berlin. I guess we should call ourselves nowadays health data scientists, because that is a lot of what we do. And I'm really curious, you mentioned algorithmic biases. I'm wondering if the industry is also taking seriously the built-in biases in the data. So when we talk about our data sets in health research, we're really worried about how are we actually training these algorithms? Well, we're training them with training data that has the built-in societal biases that we've been talking about the whole session. But there's very little talk, at least in academia, maybe it's the same in industry as well, in improving the quality of the data we have. We have more and more of it, but more doesn't necessarily mean better quality. So I'm not sure if the resource allocation is quite proportional to the scope of the problem at the moment, and I'm wondering what both of you think about that. Thank you.
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm scared about, because no, it's not yet widely known enough, and probably even worse in the industry than it is in the academia, to be honest. And that is the scary thing that you explained it so nicely, way better than I could have, but that's exactly what I was referring to earlier when I said I'm a little bit scared of the speed of how things are going, and that a lot of money is being invested in AI, but in algorithms that are trained with a bias. Yeah, so I wish we had the answer. I maybe one of you all will one day have the answer, but that is a big problem.
Yeah. We're seeing a definite shift towards requirements of explainable AI rather than black box AI, which I think is a step. How big a step, we'll see, but at least it's now on the radar. Yes. That it is desirable to be able to explain how an algorithm is working. But Alison,
Yeah. I think for us, it's largely about, if you're doing a project, asking questions about the data. You don't just say, we need a data set that's got so many lines in it. It's understanding where the data comes from, what it's composed of, and making sure that it's labeled. So even for a quite easy example, we've been doing a project on antimicrobial peptides and boosting skin's natural defenses. So one of the first questions the scientists asked was, where does this data come from? Is it men? Is it women? What's their skin types? What's their skin color? Have you selected people who have, particular deficiencies? And if you understand that, then you can see where the gaps are and you can interpret the data accordingly. So I think that also comes back to having data scientists who don't just regard data as, here's an interesting bunch of stuff, let's see if I can apply stats and do something interesting with it. It's people who are prepared to look at the whole picture and to work collaboratively with their colleagues to understand it and interpret it. I think that's the first step. I don't think that gets us all the way, but yes, you cannot then apply an algorithm to something unless you understand what it is you're applying the algorithm to.
And I guess one of the things we've got now that maybe we didn't have 2 or 3 years ago is that people are willing to engage with the idea that we need to be better at conveying where there is uncertainty, so that people can actually engage with findings and opinions that are derived from those findings with an ability to see where they fit in the bigger picture, and that maybe science doesn't give you one answer. It might give you part of an answer, or what are the parameters that answer can be useful, even if it's not this traditional science gives you that black and white, certain unequivocal truth, I guess. But that's definitely a work in progress, I'm guessing. So, yeah. We really are out of time. Thank you so much for all of your amazing questions. Thank you very much to our speakers for being so willing to share your insights, giving us your time, and really giving us a really amazing time that I think will be feeding into our lunch conversation. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.